everyone, this is Gabi. So, this is a very special podcast episode, not only because it's the first one, but because I included a very special friend of mine to be involved in this one. We all have our chosen fields, and if you do well what you do, it requires a lot of passion and endurance. And some amazing human beings chose to work in a field that is simply too much for the rest of us and would not be easy at all. I want to introduce you to one of these incredible human beings, my friend Marleen. Marleen chose to work in a field of aged care and disability. She has a passion for helping people who are vulnerable and don't always have their own voice. She's honest, she's intelligent, and extremely funny. And she never, ever gives up. We didn't meet Marleen at the best of circumstances. We both, in very different roles, tried to help an organization that did not do very well at the time. And then we both moved on. But our love of wine and Mexican food and being able to laugh at the world have kept us very close friends. In this podcast, I have talked to Marleen about the changes she has seen in her industry, how it affected people she works with, how she deals with situations that are out of her control, and how she unwinds when it all gets a bit too much. And we did it all with a glass of champagne in hand. So say hello to Marleen. So, Marleen, COVID-19 has hit all industries very hard, but nothing suffered as much as hospitality, tourism, and aged care. Tell me a bit about what changes you've seen since March and how permanent do you think they are?
So I can talk to you about aged care because that's the industry that I work in.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of fear, and there continues to be lots and lots of fear about what potentially could happen.
What are people afraid of?
People are afraid of getting unwell or not doing the right thing. So there's also a fear of we've had to do a whole lot online since March, and a lot of people hadn't actually done much stuff online. For example, I had never even heard of Zoom.
I can relate to that, yeah.
Until April. And now I'm using it almost daily.
Wow.
All the training, all meetings, everything seems to be held on Zoom. So I've had to learn how to use that. And it's good because that's quite an easy program to use. I wish I had bought shares in Zoom before this. What I'm liking is the use of hand sanitizer. I've always been an advocate of using hand sanitizer in our industry. And now hand sanitizer is everywhere, which is great, and I really hope that stays. I hope we don't move away from that, and I hope that we don't move away from doing a lot of stuff online, because it saves so much time. Like pre-coronavirus, I would have to leave the office, get into my car, drive to another office, get out of my car, go and attend the meeting, and then come back.
That's a pain in the backside, isn't it?
Exactly. It saves a lot of time just being able to dial in somewhere, which for the most part is actually okay, as long as people embrace that technology. And aged care sometimes has been a little bit behind in the A game in terms of using technology. What I'm also liking is that in terms of tourism, most people in WA go to Bali for their holidays.
Of course, as they do.
Because it's the cheapest. And it definitely is so much more cheaper than travelling around the state. But what's happened is that a lot of people have been going to Broome or have been going down south, which is brilliant and much better. The airfares to Broome have come right down because it was much cheaper to go to Bali than to Broome.
But WA is such a big state, isn't it? Like, there's so much to see.
And it's beautiful. So I'm really liking all those pictures on social media of people exploring the northern parts of WA, which are generally too expensive for most people to access. But those, like I say, those prices have come right down because people have had to adapt. And you know what? I'm also liking that internet shopping is so much more of a thing than it ever was.
That's great,
And
isn't it?
despite everything, those packages are coming through to my front door.
Isn't that awesome when a new package arrives to your door?
I love it. I love it.
Same. So tell me about the people who work in aged care and people who rely on people who work in aged care. So people who rely on carers on a day-to-day basis, they are very vulnerable even in normal circumstances. How did they react to this current situation?
You know what? Initially, in late March, early April, people rang us up and stopped services altogether.
Wow.
They were afraid. They were afraid for themselves. They were afraid for our support workers coming in and being unwell or being potentially put in a position where they would become unwell. And that was worrying to us because obviously those people require support. That happened all across the country. It happened everywhere. We were getting reports of people cancelling services. So if you can imagine that if you're an older person who needs a support to, say, have their shower, get dressed, do their shopping, get their house cleaning done, and all of a sudden this pandemic occurs and having to cancel that, we tried to talk people into accepting support workers to come back to their homes, and so that required a lot of communication. And people are slowly coming back. They're coming back to accepting support workers. They're slowly coming back to our day centre that we run. We still in WA are restricted in numbers, so we can't have the full number of people coming back, but we can have the majority of people coming back. But imagine if you're a person with, I don't know, autism or dementia, so you're used to having your support worker rock up at your house looking a certain way, and all of a sudden they're wearing a mask, or they're wearing PPE, they're wearing a gown, they're wearing whatever, carrying a forehead thermometer. I can't even imagine what that's like for some people and how confronting that must be for people.
So how does your organization deal with that?
So we have to communicate that out to our clients as best we can, or to the families. We have to make sure that we are constantly reassuring people, especially in WA. We're very lucky in WA, but in the early days we had to provide consistent reassurance and make sure that everyone from the CEO down was sending out the same message. And yeah, I suppose that's it.
Yeah,
That
it's
communication.
not easy. So your current title is Quality and Training Manager. So how do you train your staff to deal with unexpected situations that are totally out of their control, like this situation right now? How do you keep your staff in good spirits?
That's very hard to do, and actually I haven't set out to do that at all. All I've done is try to provide the information as applicable to them. So I haven't tried to make light of a bad situation. I've just said this is how it is. But as we come out from that, I've tried to point out what opportunities we can potentially make use of. For example, there's some extra payments that we may be able to provide our support workers in terms of what's come out from the government funding. Some training opportunities are being made available to us. So yeah, all I can do is really tell it like it is, not sugarcoat it, but point out what potentially is available to us that we can make use of.
But that's the best way to go, isn't it?
I think so.
So you're in Western Australia and the borders are closed there at the moment, and they have been since the beginning of April. How does it affect people who have now been cut off from relatives in other states? And do you agree with keeping the WA borders closed?
So I think everyone's really in WA is really, really grateful that we don't have that community spread, and are unlikely to get that as the borders stay closed. So we are thankful and grateful for that. Um, but I think I'm sensing from the community, from the people that I'm seeing, is that people are becoming fatigued. People are missing their family, their friends, and I think there's a real backlash from the media in terms of why are we keeping our borders closed. I think generally in the first instance we all backed the government, we all were supportive,
Yep.
but I think in the last couple of weeks we're starting to question that.
I'm not surprised there at all. If you could jump on a plane anytime right now, where would be the first place that you would go to?
I think I would come and see you.
That would be awesome. So let's talk about some government policies. So government policies change frequently nowadays, especially in aged care, and especially when it comes to the everyday services. How do you keep up with it all? How do you manage to keep your staff up to date?
This has been probably the most challenging area of the whole experience is just the enormous amount of information that we have had to process. Um, we obviously, as quality manager, I'm aligned with a lot of peak bodies. I get a lot of emails from those peak bodies as well as the government, and so it's about sifting through all that information. And sometimes that information is conflicting. So some of the
Yep.
information may be applicable to Victoria, but not to us. Some of it may be to Queensland, but not to WA. And so I've been doing a lot of reading and trying to sift through the information and translating that into everyday speak and translating it into what we need to know in the WA context. As opposed to what's happening in Victoria.
It's not easy, is it?
No, it's been really it's been a steep learning curve is what that's been.
And things change so often, don't they?
Absolutely. When this first started, we were in my organisation. We were meeting daily, if
Wow.
not hourly. It would change so often. We set up a particular committee, which was the coronavirus committee.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. So it was a lot of information that we had to process and then apply to our particular circumstance. So I'm in home care, aged care, home care, which is very different to aged care in residential care. Quite different, and a lot of the information that's coming out is related to residential care. So how does that translate into home care? And what sort of information do we provide to our workers on the ground? What sort of information do we provide to clients? What sort of mix do we not freak people out, but balance that with keeping people informed?
Because it's really important to keep clients up to date, isn't it? But as you said, not to freak them out. There's a fine balance there.
Absolutely. And how do we share that information? Do we do it via social media? Do we do it in written format? Do we do it via video, audio, podcast? All of those areas needed to be covered. Do we make posters that we stick up around the place? So we needed to communicate in all different varieties so that we covered everyone.
So what's your biggest challenge at the moment, and how do you think you're going to solve it?
at the moment, I need people to be interested in infection control.
Mhm.
Generally, people aren't. I need people to take seriously that we are still in a pandemic situation. Even though in WA we
Absolutely.
don't have any community spread, there's still a state of emergency here. We still need to keep that social distancing. There are still rules around how many people we can have in any one area. We are still needing to take people's temperatures each day to make sure that they don't have a temperature, and that includes clients as well as staff. In terms of infection control, I need all my staff to go through mandatory training. At the moment, I've only got 78% compliance rate.
So how do you deal with the rest?
That's going to be an interesting prospect because I don't quite know how at the moment, other than getting the big stick out, which I don't want to do, but I need to drive people to do that training, which the Aged Care and Quality Commission say all staff must do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But there's also a lot of bad press happening at the moment, and that's probably my main concern. So there's a lot of, in the media, there's a lot of discussion about what's happening in residential aged care, what's happening in Victoria residential aged care,
Yep.
and how does that apply to the workforce in general? How do we keep people motivated? How do we get people to apply for jobs in aged care in this current environment?
So how do you do it?
So we are trying to set ourselves apart from residential care. We're trying to say we are home care. We are quite different. We don't have the types of clients that you may see in residential care.
Mm-hmm.
Our clients are generally more self-sufficient, are able to make their own decisions. In terms of residential aged care, we don't provide the clinical support that they would do.
Yep.
But a lot of the general public would say aged care is aged care.
Not quite, is it?
It's very different. It's
Of
very
course,
different.
of course. So let's talk a bit about you. Why did you choose this career path? And are you still happy that you did? And if you could start all over again, would you do something else or would you do the same?
Well, I didn't choose this career path. It generally chose me. And I'm sure that's applicable to a lot of people. But I can't imagine working anywhere else. I can't imagine working anywhere else other than the not-for-profit sector. I can't imagine working anywhere other than with people who are vulnerable in our community, like aged care or disability. If I had to do it again, I probably would have done more study earlier on, but as my life panned out, that wasn't the right time for me. So, there's lots of aspects about your life that you end up where you end up. So it's been a learning curve, but hey, it is what it is.
It is what it is. But it is a big challenge, isn't it? Especially now.
It is a big challenge. And you know what? When I was in a previous role, I was a quality reviewer, and one of the aspects that I always used to ask organisations about was their risk management.
Mm-hmm.
And I always asked to see their risk management plans. And they always had pandemic on their risk management plans.
How did they?
And I always used to ask, okay, so let's explore the pandemic example a little bit more. What would you do if no staff were available to support your clients? And they would always say things like, well, I would, talk to other organisations, and I would do this and I would do that. And that always seemed fair enough. But looking back now, I don't think it was good enough.
See, it's always different.
I don't think we were as prepared as we should have been.
It's always different when something is done in theory than actually it happens in real life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So your job can be extremely stressful, as we know. So how do you unwind from it all? And can it be done? Is it possible with all the challenges to put it all aside and concentrate on you for a change? What do you do when you go home?
So I don't think it can. I can't put it aside because it's part of everyday life now. So there's still a high amount of fear, even in WA, around um, that it could the pandemic could take hold here, and it working in aged care, these are very vulnerable people. But what I think about when I'm not at work is I think about all the things that I appreciate in my life is that I have a job, I have a steady job, I have a full-time job. It is not likely to end anytime soon. That my children are safe and healthy. I have my house, I have my own health. Um, the only part of that is that I'm struggling with that I can't plan anything. I would like to travel, but I can't do that. I have nothing at the moment to look forward to, and that is in itself quite stressful.
Because you just came back from Europe probably like a year ago, year and a half ago?
Yes, and the people that I went away with, we're all sort of reflecting on that this time last year we were doing this
Yes,
with 6 million other people in Venice.
absolutely.
Um, and yes, I would like to, that really got my thirst going, and I would like to do more and more of that. And so it would usually take me about a year to plan that, but I can't do that at the moment. And, I'm finding that my colleagues are not planning or not wanting to take annual leave because they've not got anywhere to go other than sort of that long weekend within WA. A lot of us in WA, because we're so isolated, we like to travel overseas. We like to go a long way away to Europe or to the eastern states or to New Zealand. But at the moment, those things are not able to be done. And I think that has an impact on stress levels when you can't plan or look forward
Of
to things.
course. So are you the type of person who, if you would be given the opportunity, would you jump on a plane straight away to go somewhere, or would you need to plan it before you go?
I think in this instance, I would just jump on a plane. And
So
I
many
had
other people
various
would.
people around the place that I could very happily go and see. And they would welcome me with open arms. It's those very long holidays, in Europe that you need to plan, that you need to
Absolutely.
budget for, that you need to book for, um, that I wouldn't do. But I would jump on a plane to come to Queensland,
Queensland.
where family live. I would jump on a plane to go to New Zealand, where family live, and I know that I would have a place to stay, and all I would need is a plane ticket
Absolutely. Well,
and a
thank you.
passport.
Thank you very much for talking to me, Marleen.
It's been my absolute pleasure.